Hi there. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Coach Sherry. I am the founder of TeenWise, but I'm here tonight as a proud member of the Balance in Mind team to bring you Parent Chat. If this is your first time here, hello. And for those of you who have joined us before, I'm so glad that you've decided to join us tonight. You may have received an email that said it was tech time tonight, but we did that last parent chat. I'm so sorry for the confusion, but we're talking about sleep hygiene tonight. But the good news is tech absolutely is part of sleep hygiene. So you're still in the right place, even if you were planning on coming for tech. So tonight we have Kimby Bacon here, who is going to talk about sleep hygiene. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself because she's got a very interesting, very cool background and lots of great information to share with us. Hi, Kimby. Welcome.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you. Thanks for having me on tonight. Honored to speak to you all tonight. And I know as parents of teenagers, we have many places we could be. So I appreciate all of you who have decided to join us for the talk tonight. So I'm Dr. Kemby, and I've been a naturopathic doctor for the past 17 and a half, almost 18 years. I'm a Bastyr graduate. So I lived in the Seattle area for almost a decade of my life. I love it up there. And I'm now living in Reno. I'm also the parent of three kids, one of whom is a teen. And so yeah, I'm right now, the work that I do is in holistic health coaching for women who are transitioning through menopause. And this is such a perfect talk because as we know, teenagers going through puberty and women and men transitioning through menopause go through many of similar changes, especially with regards to their sleep. So
Yes.
I have lots of good information to share with you all tonight.
I hear so many people can be that say that their menopause like lines up with their kids' puberty and they're like, oh my gosh, this is really hard to handle. So yes, yes.
Yes, I'm in that same boat too. And yeah, there are a lot of us that share that. So
Yes.
hopefully some of this will be helpful to parents as well. So
For sure. Yeah, we have to manage our own sleep too. I want to remind everybody that you can ask questions as we go. This isn't just we're going to talk at you. So you can put your questions in the Q&A box, which you can find near the bottom. That just keeps it really easy for us to find. It doesn't get lost in the chat box. But you can also put comments that you have in the chat box, and we'll be asking you some questions as well. And you can put the answers to those questions in the chat box. You can do it anonymously if you'd like. We'll see who it's from, but everybody else won't. You can just do that there's a little arrow that you can say just the host and panelist. So feel free to use that too. All right, go ahead.
sounds good. So let me share my screen here. I have some slides. Just let me know, Sherry, if you're seeing those.
Yeah, we're seeing the
Screen.
side slides. So if there's a way that you might have to click slideshow there we go.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So as we talked about, this is sleep support for teens. Sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day. So I ran through this already, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm presenting tonight, not only as an expert, but also as a parent of teens. So I welcome all of your questions, concerns, but how do I make this happen for my teen? I'm absolutely here for all of that discussion. So um, first thing I wanted to start with is a CDC study that showed that 72% of teens, when polled, do not get adequate nightly sleep. So, as we know, many of us are in the same boat. And so, tonight, what I wanted to talk about is, first of all, what constitutes good quality sleep, a little rundown about why sleep is so important and how it affects our daily functioning, and then how we can improve sleep hygiene and encourage good sleep behaviors for our teenagers. So, very simply, good sleep is two things: quantity and quality. So we look at quantity, and this has been well studied, well documented. And 8 to 10 hours is the recommended amount of time that teenagers should be sleeping. It's slightly more than adults and slightly less than kids. But getting that 8 hours is absolutely essential. And then the quality is the quality of your sleep consists of, number one, staying asleep through the night, so not intermittent waking, and then going through all the stages of sleep. And I'll get into why this is so important. But we have stages from light sleep to deep sleep and REM sleep as well, which is our dream state. And they're all essential for our growth and recovery, especially replenishing. So the body goes through, as you know, detoxifying and things, but it also rebuilds our brain neurochemistry, our hormones, our digestive enzymes. It integrates our learning through the day. So there's a lot of really important benefits to sleep that if we aren't dropping into the deeper levels of sleep, we're just not getting. And that puts us into what's called sleep debt, or there's a gap, right, between the sleep that we need to have and what we're actually getting. So why aren't most teenagers getting enough sleep? We all know these reasons, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with them. There's a lot of demands on teenagers, right? There's sports and extracurricular activities in the evenings, work commitments, social plans, homework demands get a lot higher, at the high school level. Early school hours and having to wake up to an alarm is also part of it. Screens and technology have a twofold part to play in sleep deprivation, which we'll go over. One is the actual light exposure that happens in the evening hours, and then the overstimulation that can happen when we're just consistently on and responding and our brain is processing information. So we'll go through that in more detail. The other thing is there are hormonal shifts at play. And like I said, this is part of why I'm so passionate about talking about sleep that involves teenagers and us as we transition. Our hormones are transitioning later in life, is that anytime one hormone is shifting, all of them are shifting, and they all kind of have to figure out a new normal. And this affects our sleep. It affects our metabolism. Everything has to kind of adapt and find a rhythm. So it's not uncommon for sleep to become a real issue in teens when we feel like we had it dialed in when they were kids, or even, we went through some really good bedtime routines with our younger kids, and now it seems like it's not working, or they're staying up later, or there's new issues coming up that involve teenagers. The other thing is they're just staying busy until bedtime, or they're on their phones, or they're go, and then they just fall into bed, right? And there's no gap, there's no kind of downtime and unwind time that happens.
One thing I would add to that list would be mental health issues. The girls that I work with specifically often have a lot of anxiety that's coming from their social interactions. So when they get to bed, without what you're going to talk about, the routines and such, their anxiety is so high that they can't stop their mind from kind of spiraling. So that's another thing we can add on there.
Yes, absolutely. And I have a study that talks specifically about sleep and the brain, and it how it becomes a vicious cycle, like you're talking about, where when we're not sleeping well, when we have anxiety, it affects our sleep, and then when we aren't getting adequate sleep, then it causes greater anxiety, and so there's this snowball effect. And so oftentimes when we're looking at those kind of mental health issues, focusing on sleep is actually a really good preventative way to support our brain and support our moods, because we're able to better adapt to stress. So this, I don't need to go through all of this, but inadequate sleep causes decreased performance in school, work, and sports. There are a lot of studies talking about, most of the studies done are asking subjectively, like, how well did you sleep and what are your grades? Or how well did you sleep and, how's your sports performance? Things like that. So we can look at it, and there's absolutely an inverse correlation between the sleep and, how well they're doing in school. So the better they're sleeping, the better their performance. And of course, like you said, Sherry, there's sleep disorders are linked to all sorts of mental health issues, increased risks of accidents, mistakes, falls, all these things. decreases our tolerance and adaptiveness to stress. This one's a really important one. I think for a lot of parents, because kids are, processing a lot of things, and they're having to adapt to all sorts of, changes and uncomfortable situations. And all of these things require just a resilience, right? And so sometimes our ability to process and handle these stressors can go down if we're not sleeping well. And one of the really important ones that I just wanted to mention really quickly is this affecting the actual development. So there's a study, as we know, part of the maturation of teens is a full development of their brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is how we make decisions and all of our executive functioning, right? So this is impulse control, this is processing and focus. And what they found is that when we are not sleeping well, it can affect the actual development and growth. So the actual maturation of our brains that stays with us long term. This was an animal study that they did that was really powerful. And often, I'm providing this information as kind of support to help you explain to, if your kids are not thinking that sleep is important, it's very important to not only our current, their day-to-day functioning, but also, as they go through life, it can affect, their cognition, mental health long term. So this is, I'm also going to kind of breeze through this, but we know when kids are sleep deprived, when teens are sleep deprived, they're exhausted, they're moody, they're less able to cope and respond to challenges. So this is kind of the science behind that. The other thing I wanted to say is, as kids are going through their growth spurt, and things like that, their growth hormone is produced only in the deeper levels of sleep. So when we're going through a growth spurt, I don't know if you've noticed, when kids are teething or when they're having a growth spurt, when teenagers are going through puberty, their sleep needs go way up. And that's so important to honor that and really protect that sacred sleep space for them to be able, because the brain is going through such a huge transformation.
That's interesting here, because when we have little kids, we're like, oh my gosh, they have to take their nap. If they don't take their nap, they're going to be cranky and they're going to be hard to deal with. But as they get older, we kind of lose that somewhere along the way, that we kind of forget about that our teens need that sleep too. So, and I mean, we do also, right? If we don't get that sleep, we get a little cranky and can't deal with stress quite as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And often, as we're adults, we know that we often will forego sleep and we'll push through our limits when we get fatigued, right? And often those kinds of habits and those ways of processing information start at this age, right? We really start as teenagers and young adults with kind of powering through and staying up later than we need to, and this chronic sleep debt. So the earlier we can really intervene and support our kids and our teens, that sleep is really important and it's non-negotiable. That's a word I use a lot with my kids, that this is a non-negotiable time for your body and your brain to develop, so that you can be your best self, is really what it comes down to. And so understanding that sleep is really an active process. It's not just a passive, we're just going to lay here until morning and nothing's happening. So many things are happening. And the other reason it's so important besides hormones for teens is the brain is rebuilding neurotransmitters. And there's no time in our life that our demand is higher for these brain chemicals and messengers than in our teenage years. So this is responsible for some of our feelings, like feeling happy, feeling calm, feeling motivated. They drive our attention, our learning. Our brain rebuilds these while we're sleeping and stores them. And so when we get into kind of like a chronic sleep deprivation state, we don't actually have the capacity and the capability to have this big range of where we can move in and out of moods the way that we can when we're really supporting our brain neurochemistry. So Um,
So, Kimmy, do you feel like that there's a correlation between the extreme increase in anxiety and depression and sleep deprivation right now going on?
yes, yep. And there have been a few studies done actually kind of post COVID that are looking at that and looking at, the increased levels of mostly anxiety and stress. But when kids are under constant basically stimulation, right, from tech, from social media, from all the things, and it's like um, there's less of a downtime. So this is one of the things that we're going to get into talking about how to support our teens. When our brain is constantly on, we think about like what used to be maybe going through finals and how hard that is on our body and on our brain, right? To spend that time just completely focused and under, higher levels of stress and things. And then we get a downtime. And what's happened, especially in the last few years, is that downtime is almost none, right? Because kids are so scheduled um, and the phones and the technology are always on, and so um, their brain is constantly responding to stimulus, and it really takes a toll. So that's why their need for sleep is a lot higher, even if they don't actually um, understand that need. They'll say, sometimes I'll hear from clients like, but I don't feel tired,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not. And so I think making that distinction between, are you getting enough sleep and a good quality sleep to where you're consistently able to wake up and feel ready for the day, and you don't have that brain fatigue. So I have to sometimes separate the physical fatigue that comes from exercise and from being tired, and um, being feeling sleepy and their eyes feeling heavy, from the actual mental emotional strain and the kind of brain overload that they feel. That's a different kind of exhaustion. And sometimes really explaining to our teens that also, that overwhelm is also a part of sleep deprivation, where our brain just really needs the rest.
Yeah, I think one of the what you're talking about, this downtime, we used to have moments during the day. I was just thinking about this earlier. Like if we were sitting waiting for a doctor's appointment, we would sit in the lobby. We might be flipping through a magazine. We might be staring at the wall, maybe talking to someone who's sitting next to us. We don't have that anymore. Whenever that comes up, and our teens too, and our some of our younger kids, we grab our phone. Like we don't have. So at the end of the night, our teens have to have that downtimes, and that's when their brains just going like worrying. And then they also have stimulus, constant stimulus, but not only that, it's a constant barrage of pieces of information. Whereas it used to be, you would open up a newspaper, get some info, put it down, open up a book, get some. But now with TikTok and social media, and it's just constant. It's a lot for our brains to do, right? So maybe we need even more sleep.
Yes, yes. And um, yes, and this is what I'm going to go into now, is how we can support this, because it is different than, I mean, certainly different than when I was growing up, 30 plus years ago. Is we didn't have all that, and we had outside play, and we had all of the things that can really balance the technology. And now, like you're saying, it's like a minute of downtime, and we're right to that, and our brain is just getting this constant stimulation. um, and it just becomes a habit and something that they're used to. And so sometimes that can be a real struggle for parents. So I would love to hear any suggestions that any of the parents have for managing this, because I'll talk about some limits and things. And there's certainly different for preteens and younger teens versus older teens, in terms of the limits and how to help them with that. And I think back to when I was in medical school, and one of my professors was talking about how to help his kids make healthy choices. And one of the things he said, and he was a really healthy guy, and he said, I feed my kids the way that I feed them, and then I let them go with their friends and eat pizza and ice cream and all the things. And then the next day or two, when they're complaining to me about, their stomach aches and this and that, I say, well, Do you want to make that choice next time? And I think, making that correlation with sleep and stress with teens can be really helpful. It's sort of, encouraging them that, how you felt with this. And, maybe if we set a screen time limit and you're able to have a little downtime before you go to bed, you'll feel better. And letting them basically experiment. But I think it's really helpful to have a dialogue with some of this.
Yeah, point it out with no judgment, just kind of like, that sounds
Yeah,
like
curious.
say. I wonder why that might be. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask, before we move on to this, which is we really need to know, in the chat box, if everyone would put maybe the age of their kids and then how many hours do you kind of think or estimate that they get per night? No judgment on this, by the way. This is just for all of us to kind of see. I know it's all over the place and it really depends on your kids, but it'll just be interesting to see that. So if you can put that in the chat box, we'd appreciate that. All right.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So I'm going to run through each of these topics individually. So this first one, it's called sleep hygiene, and that's, what we're here to talk about. Sleep hygiene really means the overall sleep environment. And this is one that, especially for younger kids or kids who really understand that they're having a hard time sleeping, and they know that they would like some support with it. The first thing is really just assessing their room environment. And before we go into this, I wanted to say that there's one. Let me see if I have it on here. I'm going to flip through really quick. Okay, didn't make it in here. So one of the things I wanted to say is a really good starting point is to kind of look at the overall schedule that your teens have. And the most important thing is, do they have 8 hours a night to sleep between all of the things that they have on their plate and their schedule? And kind of working with them to see if that's, how you can make that happen. And for some kids, I know my teenager is in competitive sports, and there were nights he's out until 10 p.m. playing baseball, and so there's no discussion then. There's no way he can get to sleep before 10 on those nights, right? So that's okay. So it's about basically trying to adapt the best sleep schedule for them right now. And sometimes that means catching up on the weekends, or it means a few nights going to bed earlier, or shifting their homework to do more on certain nights. So this is really, that's a big part of the experiment, is saying, okay, is there a way that we can help support them with their schedule, that they're actually able to carve out a full 8 hours? Because I know, for a lot of us, that's a big part of the challenge to begin with. And then we look at, is their room comfortable and all of these other things. But the first thing is actually finding time in the schedule.
And we need to do that for ourselves as well, right? Like we have to make sure we get our sleep, and maybe that's role modeling for them too. Yes. And I think this is what you're talking about is so important, especially as our kids get older, when they're choosing, are they going to do 5 AP classes, is thinking about the workload, and is that going to mean that they don't get enough sleep? Or if they are going to schedule, 3 to 4 different extracurriculars, does that mean that then they can't sleep? We have to really put sleep at the forefront, because that affects mental health, as you're talking about, and their maturation and their brain development. So it has to be high on the list of priorities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then once you have that time carved out, then it's really looking at, and a lot of times it's asking, when you're starting to fall asleep, there's three possibilities. One is I feel ready and I fall asleep, no problem. The other one is I go to fall asleep and my mind is racing, or I'm having a really hard time falling asleep. And the third one that I see actually quite a bit in teens is, it's lights out time and I fall asleep. I'm out, phone in hand. I actually read a study that said when they did a poll, almost 20% of the kids said they had fallen asleep with a device on, with their phone on, with their iPad on, right? And that's a sign of being overtired, right? When we're falling asleep, we're hitting the pillow and we fall asleep with the lights on, or we fall asleep with our device on, that's a good time to kind of be able to breach that conversation and say, hey, if this is happening, this just means you need more sleep, and you're overtired. And what we want is that middle ground where they know it's time to sleep, their body is ready to fall asleep, their room is comfortable, so when they turn off the lights, they're easily falling asleep.
Can you
So
say, like, for the first one, is your room comfortable for you? Do you have some thoughts on what that means?
yeah, so a lot of times, I think this is a great place to start when talking about sleep is, does your room feel like a relaxing, calming place? Or do you have, you know, I know a lot of kids keep theirs a mess, my son included. It does not seem to bother him, so I just leave it.
Mhm.
But for a lot of times, for parents and kids, if there's unfinished work, if they have things that are distracting them in their bedroom, it can be really hard to fall asleep. For some kids, they like to actually it's helpful to actually put their books away, put their computer away, prepare for school the next day, so it's not sitting out. Even if they have a desk in their room, it's not kind of like glaring at them from the corner of, oh, I didn't, I still need to study for this. Or because sometimes those kind of unfinished projects, or I could study more for this test, these kinds of thoughts will impact our ability to fall asleep, because our mind, again, can't kind of shut off from that stimulation.
Would you recommend, if possible, that their workspace is not in their bedroom?
I think it's really individual. Some kids that are having a hard time, or that feel a lot of pressure around school, especially, it can be nice to have it outside the bedroom, where they can't see it, or they have some kind of barrier between the bed area and their desk, or it's kind of in a separate corner. Often, I'll say just try going ahead and clearing it off and putting everything that you have, just putting it away. In the same way that for some kids, what works really well is actually saying, let's get ready together for school. So lay out your clothes, prepare everything for tomorrow. This is one I learned mostly from my clients, because a lot of adults, in order to really calm down and release all of the events from today, we need to feel prepared for tomorrow. We need to know what's on our schedule. We need to, even write out a to-do list. And so teenagers really are the same. They store so much in their brain that they're thinking about in terms of anticipating for tomorrow. And, I need to call so-and-so, and I need to, remember to turn this in. And I need to, they have all these like loose ends, that I call them, that are floating around, that just affect our nervous system and our ability to kind of say, okay, today, now is time for relaxing, and I don't need to actually do anything else tonight. Can be a really powerful and important thing. So a lot of times, and I'll talk about this with the screens, having kind of like a hard stop limit on all of this stuff that they're doing for school before bed, and saying, like after 9:30 or after 10 o'clock, you're done, can be really helpful for some kids to say, okay, now I can kind of shut down and calm down. So when I talk about this, removing or turning off electronics, and the next slide that I want to talk about is specifically about electronics, but this is the twofold thing, is that as we know, any kind of screens that are hitting our eyes, any kind of light, especially blue light, affects our melatonin, it affects our circadian rhythm. So that's the really big reason to kind of make sure the computers are closed and there's not, some kind of screen light going on or turning on in the middle of the night with these notifications. Also, like buzzing noise, text noise. I've polled a lot of teenagers, and they all say, yeah, I do wake up and I hear my phone. I hear the text dinging, or I hear a notification go off. And it's incredibly disruptive to our sleep to come out of a mid-cycle deep sleep. And even if it's light interrupted sleep where they're not fully waking up, it really impacts their sleep quality. So I really encourage parents and teenagers to talk about this and say, you know, you can have your phone if you want to have your phone in your room, but it needs to be off, and it needs to be off between these hours, for that reason. And the other big thing I wanted to say as we head into the next slide is if your teen is waking in the middle of the night, not turning the lights on, even if they're getting up to use the bathroom or something like that, that they have a night light, or they have, as much as possible, a really dark room environment. And this is why. So as many of you probably know and you're aware of, you've heard of melatonin and how, you know, supportive it can be for sleep. It comes from our pineal gland. And basically it controls our sleep wake cycle, or our circadian rhythm. And the two things that really support a healthy circadian rhythm or a sleep wake cycle are consistent bedtime. So trying to go to bed around the same time every night helps our body know when to produce melatonin. Historically, you know, we would go to bed when it got dark outside, we would wake up with the light. We know this ideal state is not possible for teenagers in this modern world, right? We're not doing that. But as much as we can mimic that, that helps our body to know how much melatonin to release, when to release it, and then we're not degrading it too soon. So what happens is, let's say our teenager is falling asleep regularly at 11 o'clock p.m. And before they go to bed, they're on their computer until 10:30, and then they're shutting it down. But then 11, they're in bed scrolling on their phone. Or at 11, they go in the bathroom and take a shower and bright lights. What can happen is, as our body's used to producing melatonin, when we have the light coming in and hitting our retina, it'll actually degrade or process away that melatonin. So we won't get the surge that helps us fall asleep. And over time, that can really wreak havoc on our body, knowing basically when it's nighttime and when we're falling asleep, and when it's morning time and we need to, you know, be awake. So for a lot of teenagers, this can happen when they're affecting their sleep as they're going to bed, that then they wake up in the morning and they feel really groggy. And it's not always because they didn't get enough sleep. Sometimes it's the days that they really sleep in, right, on the weekends, and then they wake up at, you know, 11 a.m. or noon and they're really tired. So that's when it's important to get outside in the daytime, have the bright light, you know, hit our eyes in the morning, turn on really bright lights in the bathroom. That helps signal the body all of the rhythm and all of the hormones that say, okay, it's daytime. It's time to be up. It's time to be, you know, focusing, be attentive, you know, have our energy go up. So this is really the juxtaposition that happens in the nighttime. And what happens for teenagers naturally is that their body shifts this circadian rhythm a little later. So when we're used to maybe, you know, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. bedtime, and it starts to naturally move back. This is a natural part of actually going through puberty, the later bedtime does get established. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're going to bed later, as long as they can stay asleep longer. And when they wake up, they're exposing themselves to that bright light and keeping the lights really low at night. Does that make sense?
You used to live in this area of the country, and you know that it is really dark a lot and the sun goes down. We're not there yet, but like 4:30. So how do we mitigate that?
Yes. So bright lights inside. I mean, of course, natural light is whenever possible is amazing. But yes, for a lot of us, you know, working people, especially in the Northwest, you go to work before it's light, and you know, leave work when it's dark as well. So exposing yourself to bright lights, just turning on really bright lights in your house, and actually, you know, looking into the light is the best way to really stimulate and start that daytime cycle. So just really bright lights, and then in the evening, as low and kind of dim lights as possible. So I really advocate for like book lamps for teenagers. So not having the overhead light on when they're winding down. And there are all sorts of, you know, apps and things where we can lower the light on our on iPads and on Kindles and things like that to filter out some of that light so it's not so bright. And those can certainly help. But if possible, and this is I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Sherry, about having an electronic curfew. The evidence is really strong about when teens put their smartphones down an hour before bed, which I know will probably cause a ruckus, a big, yeah. But it's 2.5 hours of sleep extra per week from doing that, from having a curfew. So
I think it's a great idea. And one of the things that we're up against when we start talking about middle school and high school and, even elementary these days is so much of their schoolwork is on the computer. So if we say an hour before bedtime, you need to be off, that means they need to have their homework done. That's one of the struggles that we have there. But if we can do our best to help them to, maybe it's half an hour, maybe that's going to be better than it was before. Whatever we can do to try to start establishing that pattern. And part of it is, again, going back to us, if we do that, that helps. If we're saying you need to put your phone away, but we've got ours, that really creates a lot of tension, and they're looking at your phone longingly. So that could probably help too.
Yes. It's a big one, the modeling or saying as a family, this is something that we're choosing, and it's a battle for sure. And I think, the way that we do it is we just have a hard stop. And I, try to say, I really want to build in that like 20 minutes. That's how it is at our house. Like a good 20 minutes where you're, in your room, lights out, or, book light, and you're winding down, and there's no communication.
There was one thing you had on a couple slides ago, we kind of skipped over. It was the last one that you had, like essential oils, and there were some other things on that slide that we didn't go over. Maybe that would be helpful if you have like a candle that has a scent, then you're turning the lights down, you've got the smell, and it's part of like a routine for bedtime that's calming and relaxing.
Yes. Yep. So bedtime routines, that's exactly what I was going to talk about next. Perfect. This is a big one, and this is one where we can really start to model and talk to our kids about this. And I talk to a lot of teenagers as they're transitioning to college or after their first year of college, and I'm so happy that you have this group, because there are so many teenagers who and parents who they aren't taught these things. They aren't taught meditation and mindfulness exercises and all of the things that they can be doing, not only to support their mental health, but to help release stress and help them wind down and help them process what they're going through, right? And all of these things can be helpful for bedtime routines as well, because as I said, I would say the biggest issue for teenagers with sleep, other than actually carving out being able to find the full 8 to 10 hours, is they just have an overactive and overstimulated mind all the time. And so it's almost an impossible thing, and I often tell them, parents, imagine if you hadn't taught, your child how to fall asleep, and you would just set down a baby and walk away, right? They don't have the tools to be able to wind themselves down, right? That's why the rocking and swaddling and shushing and all of these, things that are a big part of sleep for kids, for young infants and young kids. We have to do that as teenagers and as adults as well, and so often we're asking our bodies and our minds to do something that's really difficult, which is, I'm going to go, full on, I'm going to, be texting and driving and out and doing sports. And then I'm going to lay down in bed and I'm going to fall right asleep and I'm going to get a great sleep. And that's a really big ask, because we don't have, our nervous system is not given the time to kind of shift into that parasympathetic state, which is when we have the best rest and digestion, right? And so when our nervous system is constantly being stimulated by things in our environment, by responding, and having social interactions and all of these things. Um, we really need some tools um, to help us manage, and especially teenagers. This is such a great time to support them with all of these tools. So there's kind of, I think of it as kind of two pronged. One of them is things that help them physically, right? So essential oils for some teens, taking a bath or a shower before bed is a great routine. Um, reading some kind of relaxing book, nothing too animated or, stressful, or mysteries or things like that. It can be really helpful. And the goal just being what relaxes you, what do you enjoy that kind of just lets you out of your mind and into your body and just, playing or creating or enjoying. So it may even be, it may be art, it may be journaling, just helping them find those things right before then they're in a place where they're under a lot of stress or they're going away to college and they don't feel like they have those tools. So thoughts on that? I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Sherry.
Yeah, I think I like to think about when our kids were little and we had bedtime routines, right? And I would actually love to hear in the chat box what people's like little routines were for their toddlers. We can go down memory lane a little bit, but we used to, maybe it was you brushed your teeth together and then you like read a book and then you cuddled in bed a little bit and then they went to bed. Sometimes, but not often, you didn't just like grab your toddler and say, all right, in bed and now go to sleep. We had the routine for them. And somewhere along the way, we lose it. My guess is as homework becomes more of a thing, we lose that routine and it's kind of like, okay, you got to get to bed now. So we have to kind of reteach this idea of having a bedtime routine like you're saying, so their bodies are like, okay, I know I'm getting ready for bed now. And also it just helps to calm their mind. With so many kids, high anxiety, high depression, this gives them a moment that's for themselves. So if you're kind of talking about this routine in a way that this is for you, this is something that's going to make your life better, rather than I want you to do this and I want you to turn your thing off and I want you to, that we do it collaboratively, then it really helps the process. And for us too, everything that you're saying can be, we can do this too, because we also as parents often shut down the lights, get in bed, and then we can't go to sleep, or we're not getting that good sleep that we need. So this is a really, really good idea. And we just have to be collaborative when we're presenting these ideas.
Yes, I love that. And you're so right. It's like it goes from being a shared experience where we're helping and we're supporting our kids to, okay, you go figure it out. Make sure you brush your teeth, make sure you do your homework, but blah, 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 all these things, right? These tasks. And while I totally get it and I do it as well, it's like, they're going to bed with, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. And there's no, and they're on their own for really how to unwind. And so for a lot of them, social media is a way that they have that connection and they, feel like they relax, even though, it might be mindlessly scrolling. That's one way. And so, the way that I approach this with my son is to say, yeah, that is one way. That's one way you could choose to kind of power down from your day and just kind of check out and prepare for bed. Or there's this, and this. So like providing them other tools is a way for them to go, oh yeah, I actually love how I feel after a bath. I would love to have a bath, and just relax. Or yeah, I love just listening to, records in my room. And it's their idea because they, there is a transition from kind of us helping them to really, this is now for them to be able to provide for themselves, and have these tools that they can go to when they're feeling overwhelmed, anxious. And it's not only with sleep, it's anytime during the day when they're feeling overstimulated, they can go find a quiet space and breathe, and do some of these things that can really help to kind of support their brains to kind of go, okay, it's okay to take a pause. It doesn't have to be only at night. um
And I
so
know we have, I'm in the chat box, and people had said how much sleep their kids get and what ages they are. So we've
yes.
got some people with younger kids, which is great because it's going to be even easier for you to create this idea of a bedtime routine and just keep that up even when they hit middle school.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at these, and yeah, it definitely, I have I have a 13-year-old and I have twins who are 8. And I know for my older son, it became, the more scheduled things he had, like the later nights with sports and things like that, the harder it was. And that was when it became really important to say, okay, um, we're going to really protect this bedtime routine, because if you eat dinner too late, if you're eating dinner at 10:30 and then you still need to check your homework and you still need to unwind, it's too late. So I had to make certain adjustments. And so this can be really helpful for parents to say, oh, okay, I'm not, maybe a protein shake before bed is the best thing for them, or, working with them with how to kind of expedite that process. Like I said, maybe it's not a full hour of, no screen time before bed, because it's already 10 o'clock. It's like maybe it's 20 minutes, but it just gives them that little bit of time. So the more we can give them techniques, and this is something I work with my clients too, is that we don't always have an hour to unwind, right? And take a bubble bath, or, do whatever the things are. It might be 5-10 minutes. And so some of the techniques, I mean, kids probably know more of the apps than I do, but there are some really great ones that can help with calming our system down and supporting sleep. So let me see if I can go back.
Yeah, there's one that's called Calm. There's one that's Insight
Yes.
Timer. There's all sorts of things on Insight Timer, like kind of meditations around test anxiety or menstrual cramps, or there's so many things. Yeah. One of the things that, as we're helping them to create their routine, their bedtime routine, it can feel like we're kind of making them younger, right? And at middle school, high school, they want to feel older. So one of the things you can do is like to create, like have a journal, a nice pen, have a cup of tea, like some sort of, tea that's not caffeinated, of course, and create like a little corner for them. This is where they're going to go for that nighttime routine of writing in their journal, having their mug, and their tea, and just having that moment where they're going to feel kind of older like that. And so that may be one way to get them to talk them into it.
That's such a great point. And this is a debate we've had in my house with my older one, who wants to feel older. And part of that is going to sleep later. In his mind, and I had to explain to him his school starts earlier. So that's a no. And so we had to figure out other ways that he could have that feeling that, he's getting a little bit different approach than his brother and sister. And what we do that's worked for us is he still has quiet time in his room where he's able to be by himself while we're going through like the sleep routine with the littles and helping them, brush their teeth and things like that. But since he has to be up for his school that starts at 8 o'clock and theirs doesn't start till 9, it's just, I've just explained you don't get enough sleep if you're staying up later. But you can do this or that instead. So I think it's really helpful for them to understand the why behind some of the requests, and kind of say, you want to be your best, not only on a day-to-day basis, but in general. And it's really hard to not get good quality sleep during the weekdays and try to make it up on the weekends just doesn't work out for a variety of reasons. But so the more sleep we can get during the day, I mean during the school week, the better. So the one thing I wanted to say, and then maybe we can just chat or open it up to questions, is and there are a lot of really good guided imageries, but the one that I wanted to share with you all tonight is a technique called progressive relaxation technique. So if any of you are well versed in meditation or guided imagery, I would love to know if anyone has ever tried this before. It's one of my favorites, both for adults and for teens. And the reason is because it's a more active type of meditation, and it can be a really fun one for kids. So I started this with my kids when they were really young. So maybe 5 or 6 years old. And this is something sometimes we'll do before sleep together. It's also something that, you know, you can tell your teenagers if they're having a hard time falling asleep because they feel like their mind's still active. This is a really nice way to kind of, it only takes 3 to 5 minutes and just kind of release and, you know, let the tension go for the day. So what it is, really simply, you take a muscle group from head to toe, you tense it. So you tense all the muscles in your face, tense all of the muscles in your neck as much as you can for about 5 seconds. So I'll just do this for you really briefly. And you're still breathing. Make sure you're breathing. And then you let it go. And you relax those. And then you tense up your shoulders as much as you can, every muscle in your shoulder for about 5 seconds. And then you let it go. And then you do the same thing with your hands, your arms, your fists, all of it. You tense it for a good 5 seconds, hard as you can, as much as you can. And then you relax it. Do the same thing with your stomach, with your back, upper thighs, legs and feet. It takes, as you can see, it takes, you know, maybe a minute or two. They take 5 really deep breaths. This is something that I teach my kids is, you know, just a quick inhale and exhale through the nose, like 4 seconds. And then they just assess, am I holding tension anywhere? Is there anywhere that I feel like, is it in my jaws? Is it in my hands? Is it in my legs? And then they go to that body part again and they tense it while they're breathing, and then they let it go. And then at the end of it, you know, I usually work with my kids, and I teach this to clients too, some kind of mantra or some kind of phrase that they can say to themselves at the very end, like, I'm preparing my body for sleep and I let go of all of the stress from my day. Something really simple like that. It's amazing the difference that that can make, because it's a really physical, tangible way for teenagers to kind of go, oh yeah, I felt that. I felt the difference in my body when I was holding tension and then when I let it go. So it's a really simple thing you can share. There are quite a few, what do you call it? I guess, ways to find it on YouTube where you can actually do like a guided progressive relaxation technique. But once they get used to it, it's something that they can just kind of fall back on and do like a check-in. It also helps them just breathe and be in their body and stop thinking.
That's a really good one for kids who are anxious. It's really funny when I teach a group of teenagers, I'll ask them the question, where do you go into school when you're really upset? And everybody in unison yells, the bathroom. That's their place to go, right? So this is something they can go to the bathroom if they're about to, you know, break out in tears and do this, what do you call it? Progressive, what is it?
Relaxation technique.
They can do this to kind of reset their whole system and be like, okay, I got the rest of the day. I can do this. So it's useful in many ways.
And I love it because, you know, the act of tensing everything, it gets the stress out of the body actually a lot more effectively than if we're just saying, relax, you know, feel calm. It's like you almost need, you know, you need that, especially for teenagers, they really need that expression. So it really helps them be in their feeling and in their body and kind of understand that they are holding tension in all of these places. You know, they might really even get an awareness for how that shows up. And like I said, or if they're not breathing, you know, during the day when they're stressed, it's a good way to, like you said, just kind of check in. If they're feeling overwhelmed, they can just do it anywhere, right? Yeah. And have that, have the relaxation that comes. And of course, releasing endorphins, all the things that happen with that really helps the body prepare for sleep. So,
And one of the things that is really key to remember is we might introduce these to our kids and they roll their eyes and they say we're ridiculous or whatever, but that's okay. It doesn't mean they have to say, yes, oh my gosh, thank you so much for giving me this. But when you're planting the seed, they may go and do this anyway when you're not watching, that they don't want you to be right as a parent. It just depends on your kid, right? But so don't get discouraged if you recommend these things, give them the idea of a bedtime routine and they're rolling their eyes and saying, no way. You're giving them the tools, because if you don't introduce it, they most likely are not going to find this methodology to get more sleep. You just got to talk about it.
totally. Yep. And everybody's different. And, I'm always talking about this with my clients is find one that really works for you. And, sometimes this is, like you said, it's really about modeling it and saying, I did this and I really slept well. I wanted to share it with you. Or, I noticed you're having a hard time falling asleep and I, found this if you want to check it out. I know, for some kids, stretching, it takes a little bit too long, too much time, but rolling, like those rollers and things, will really work as well. So, but it's just a matter of talking to them about having some tools to help their body, their mind unwind and prepare themselves for sleep. That it doesn't mean they're having a hard time with sleep. This is, part of what we've kind of lost, is this ability or this understanding that everybody, not just, young kids and babies, everyone really needs this time to prepare our body and our mind for deep sleep. To be able to drop into deep sleep requires that our nervous system be in a relaxed state. And we can't just often, snap our fingers and have that happen. We really have to be very intentional about it.
So true. We have 2 minutes left, Kimby. So we can, do you have other slides or can we stop sharing slides?
I will stop sharing. All I had was a little bit about how to contact me if anyone had questions or
Oh yeah, well, let's put that back up because I think you have a QR code, right? Let's put that one back up so people can find you easily. And if you have any questions, Dr. Kimby's nice enough to say, hey, contact me. But also you can, since we have a minute and a half, you can put those in the chat box still and we can make sure that we answer those.
Yep. You're welcome to go here. This just has my website on here, which has my email information and my Facebook group and things like that. So I would love to hear from any of you, and I would love to answer any questions if you have.
Excellent. So let's see. I don't see any questions coming up, but 1 second. My screen just changed on its own. I don't know what it's doing here, but okay, here we go. All right. So we are going to send out an email as we always do with the recording to this. We'll also send some resources and then how to contact Dr. Kimby in case you do have any follow-up questions. And also, since you were mentioning breathing tonight, I just want to remind everybody that there is a recording in the parent chat library that's on, the full recordings on breathing. So if you want to find some more there, I believe that was 2 sessions ago. So you can find that in our library as well. Yes, and hold on 1 second. A question. Do red light bulbs help with sleep?
So, yes and no. What they found is that the blue light is the most harmful in terms of the melatonin sleep wake cycle. So, blue light after the time that we are supposed to be asleep or in the middle of the night is the most harmful. So, in that way, yes, red light, and as opposed to or instead of a night light can be really helpful because it doesn't have the same effect on our retina at affecting that circadian rhythm. Um, and then the really important thing is the morning bright light.
So there's also the question, do the sunrise alarms help? So my guess is yes, according to what you've told us.
Yeah, they can be really helpful, especially if your room environment is very dark. Um, which I highly recommend if possible. And then, waking to that. There's um the biggest benefit to the sunrise alarm is that as the body gets used to the consistent sleep cycle, so, falling asleep around the same time. And when I say around the same time, like 20 to 30 minutes, so 10:30 to 11 being your bedtime is great, or whatever that time is within that window. As the body gets used to waking up at the same time, it will adapt to that kind of sunrise alarm. So when it starts to get light, the body will actually basically wake itself up more naturally. And part of the reason that's so important is that the most challenging thing is when we're in a period of deep sleep or REM sleep and our alarm goes off, because it's such an abrupt shift to come out of that all the way, that often that's the groggy and the grumpy and all of that comes from. It's just a really hard transition to make. But we can't always really predict how that's going to go. The best way to predict that is by consistent bedtimes and consistent wake times, and that way we can almost more naturally track how the body's going to move through those cycles, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Our body knows what to expect, basically, is what it
Yeah.
comes down to, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And the more consistent we are, and as we know, even being consistent with teenagers is a real struggle, but the more consistent we are with, bedtime routines, with, sleeping and eating routines, the more the body is able to follow that schedule, and it follows the circadian rhythm, which is why, eating a high protein breakfast in the morning and not eating too late at night is also part of the way that our metabolism supports our circadian rhythm to go, oh, okay, I'm not eating late because I'm ready to power down for sleep. And I'm, eating in the morning because I'm ready to have energy for my day. So there are a lot of ways we can kind of support that natural cycle in the body too.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it. Very informative. I knew it would be. And so I'm so glad you agreed to join us. And for all of you that took your time to be here tonight, I hope you have a really good night of sleep. And we will see you for the next parent chat in December, which is one that I'm going to actually be doing on how to support your kids through friendship issues. So I hope to see you then. And good night, Dr. Kimby. I appreciate you being here, and good night to everyone else.
Right. Good
Have
night.
a great night's sleep.